of solving for the sides. Today we are going to solve for missing angles. So how did I word this the other day? Let's see, to solve for a side. So we're going to put to solve for an angle. So it's kind of the same idea when you're solving for an angle. You are still going to be using your trig functions, but you need to, you're going to use a different function on Desmos. So when you are solving for an angle, first thing you do is you put your pencil on the angle you are solving for. So you're not going to be given an angle this time. You're going to have to actually find an angle. So put your pencil on the angle you are solving for. Once you've put your pencil there, then you are going to set up, or actually you're going to figure out what trig ratio you need to use. So you have to figure out, are you going to have to use sine, cosine, or tangent? After you figure out what trig ratio you have to use, then you are going to set up that trig ratio. So if it's an opposite over hypotenuse, opposite over adjacent, that kind of thing. And the last step is once you have your trig ratio set up, then you're going to do the inverse of the ratio. So that part right there will be a little weird. You're not going to be cross multiplying or anything like that here. You're just going to be doing what's called the inverse. So I'm going to get Desmos pulled up here. You're going to need that today. Remember when you are in Desmos, you want to, turn this light off here. You want to go up to this little thing here. See how mine's in radian mode? I want it in degree mode. So I guess even though I did just use it in degree mode, it does push it back to radian when you get out of it. So please make sure, go up to the little wrench, make sure it's in degree mode. Once it's in degree mode, you're good to go. So now, come over here and let's solve for some angles. So for number 1, and again, right here it says make sure your calculator is in degree mode. I cannot stress it enough that if you do your entire quizzes or tests in radian mode, you're gonna get super frustrated. So for number 1 here, you are solving for an angle. You're solving for something on the inside of your triangle. That's an angle. So step 1, if you look back at those directions, it said put your pencil on the angle that you're trying to find. Okay, done. Now you need to figure out, because remember we have so, ka, toa. Now we need to figure out which one of these, sine, cosine, or tangent, are we actually going to use. So if this is my angle, the 15 is opposite. The 24 is across from the 90-degree angle. That is the hypotenuse. So I have opposite and hypotenuse, so I'm going to use sine. So from the angle, sine is O over H. So I do 15 over 24. So I set up the trig ratio, set up the ratio, and then do the inverse. So we did opposite over hypotenuse, and we said that this was sine. So you're going to do the inverse of sine, so it's to the -1 of 15 over 24. So you're not actually using sine. You're using this thing called the inverse. Whenever you solve for an angle, you always use the inverse. So I'm going to go to functions, and I want this sine to the -1. And then they're going to give you parentheses, and I need to do 15 divided by 24. And there you go right there, 38.7. And these are angles, so we do 38.7 degrees. And that's it. Finding angles actually is a little bit easier than sides because you don't have to cross multiply or anything like that. You just have to make sure that you remember to use this inverse. Let's take a look at number 2. I'm not going to do as many of these today because you are doing the same thing basically every time. The hardest part is figuring out which trig function to use. So here, put your pencil on the angle. Across from the 90-degree angle, this 11 is the hypotenuse. And then back on the angle, this 8 is the adjacent. A and H is cosine. So I'm going to do cosine inverse, and then I do a over h, 8 over 11. Remember, you're doing the inverse. So I grab my Desmos out, maybe, there we go. And I need to plug this in now. Whoops, there we go. So exit out of that. So I go function cosine -1 or cosine inverse. And then I do 8 divided by 11, and I get 43.3 degrees. So for these, there's not a lot of work to show. So for these, I do need to see what you're plugging into the calculator. If you just give me a number, I'm going to mark it half off. I need to see what you're plugging in. Because let's say that you accidentally forget and you leave your calculator or your Desmos into like in radian mode. If I see that you know how to set it up correctly, I can help you out a little bit. Let's take a look at number 3, and I think this might be the last one I do. So here's my pencil. Put your pencil on the angle that you're trying to find. 20 is opposite. 37 is adjacent because this is the hypotenuse. O and A is tangent. So I'm going to do tangent inverse. And then tangent is O over A. O over A, 20 over 37. So now I need to plug that in. So I go to function tan -1, 20 divided by 37. And I get 28.4 degrees. 28.4 degrees. Hopefully that makes sense. If you have any issues or questions, comments, or concerns, obviously I can go through additional ones for those who need it. Hardest part is just making sure that you set up the fractions correctly. Make sure you are using the inverse, and also I can't stress enough to make sure that your calculators are in degree mode. So any issues, don't hesitate to reach out.